Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and every once in a while I receive an email question from a viewer that piques my curiosity and my interest in a particular topic, and so I decide to opine on it for a while. Sometimes I just write a detailed response back, but I realized, what the hell am I doing writing all of this down for? I'm a goddamn YouTuber, and I'm not making a video out of this? I must be insane, or stupid, or a little of both. Also, I was told that some people are able to connect with the YouTuber more if they have an image of the screen to latch onto, so I'm going to use this because it is actually an artistic rendering of my actual real-life ugly mug until such time as I decide to do something different. So here's me leaning into the psychology behind YouTube, and if it doesn't work, a certain voice actor friend of mine will receive 100% of the blame, although if it does help the channel, then this was 100% my idea. Also, I found out that YouTube is not sending out notifications to everyone, and my channel has not been hitting suggested feeds since around January, which would explain a lot of the difficulties I've been experiencing in recent months. So I would ask that if you feel I've earned your support and effort, to share this video and others on social media. Also, if you want to make certain you don't miss a video, I would recommend you check out notify.me. It is a notification app that a clever individual, not me, designed to make sure you get notified when a video goes live. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, and this is not an advertisement, merely me trying to fight against the downsides of the YouTube algorithm, and I'll put a link to the notify.me down in the description below. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. I decided that instead of responding offline, I'd allow a bit of conversation. That way everyone could hear what I have to say and also have an opportunity to weigh in. So this will be different from my normal format of videos, and this will be a simple response video. The email I received was from Zelokin, and my apologies if I pronounced that wrong, and let me read what they sent to me. Hello, SidAlpha. I've been watching your channel for close to a year now, and I would like to ask you your thoughts on something. I know it's an old issue, but still prevalent: crunch and excessively high work weeks. I know a lot of YouTubers that deal with reporting on games have already talked about this, yourself and Jim Sterling and Yong Ya included, but there was a thought that slipped my mind until recently. While it is a horrible and practically evil thing to make people work like that, aren't most game developers/programmers, the people who actually make the game and not the named company behind them, aren't most of them contractors? If they are, then that means they did willingly sign a contract that would have stated the expected due dates of the project and how much they would have to work to make sure it remains on schedule. So in a sense, these developers and programmers willingly go into these contracts knowing this will happen. Again, while I do not approve of such practices, as I've seen the effects a heavy work week can have on people, these people, the developers and programmers, knew what they were getting into and to an extent are just as much to blame as the publishers that set these deadlines. I say to an extent because these people do need to work to survive and support themselves and their families, and it's the evil and greed of the corporate world that preys upon those individuals who either do this out of love for games or someone who wants to make use of sought-after skills in the digital age. But again, these developers and programmers agreed to this. Please understand, I do not get any enjoyment in playing the so-called devil's advocate. I actually really don't like being that guy, but sometimes I feel I have to, at least when the reality of a situation is compromised. I try to be a realist, but sometimes I do allow my own feelings toward a situation to get the better of me, and I fully admit to that. But I think I'm rambling at this point. I just wanted to ask your personal thoughts on this, even though you already talked about heavy crunch. So to be clear, the writer is not saying that crunch is bad. Quite the opposite. What they are claiming is that game developers, particularly contractors, knew what they were signing up for going into things. And while that is a valid point to make, it sort of misses the reason why crunch is so bad. Now, I'm an arrogant person. I think we all know this full well by now, so as I'm an egotist, I'm going to use myself for a basis of comparison. The reason being is because what developers call crunch is what I call a perpetual state of being. On average, I work between 70 and 90 hours per week, with the vast majority of those hours, at minimum 60 per week, being the day job, with the remainder being video creation for YouTube. It does not allow for a normal sleep schedule. Hell, even when I'm exercising, I'm working remotely on some server or another while I mindlessly plod along on a treadmill. This sort of work habit has become normal for me over the course of not only months, but years. I'm not telling you all of this simply to be able to dunk on game developers or to tell them to get on my level, although I have said exactly that in jest on Twitter. No, I say this because I want everyone to know that I understand full well the not only physical, but emotional and intellectual impact that working such hours can cause. When you're fatigued, it increases the difficulty of even mundane tasks. Accidents and errors grow exponentially more common, and the ability to think and plan strategically go right out the Goram window, to borrow a phrase from Firefly. But yes, these developers do accept and enter into contracts knowing full well that they'll be required to engage in crunch. The reason for this is because it is so common within the industry that it is rare and well nigh impossible to find a development company that does not engage in crunch because there just aren't very many of them out there. But why is that? Well, first it comes down to why is there crunch in the first place? Obviously, when you're dealing with a commercial product, you must have a set release date. All of your marketing and advertising hinges upon that release date, and that is not exactly what you would call an inconsequential amount of money. Along with that is the simple fact that video games, despite what the AAA industry is attempting to turn them into, are currently still creative products. Now, creative products, by their very nature, run into errors. Glitches, bugs, story changes, scope changes, any one of 1,000 little things can cause delays to occur. And with each single delay, the amount that needs to get done before the deadline slowly mounts. And as that mounts, eventually a game will reach a point of critical mass where there comes a possibility that the release date might need to be pushed back. Invariably, crunch is an attempt to offset that, or hopefully prevent that decision from being forced into being made. Because if a game gets pushed back, there is a very large amount of money in advertising that essentially becomes wasted for all intents and purposes. Now, that will mean lower profits and less potential operating revenue. Now, a good project manager will be able to anticipate these problems and account for them, and many of them do. And I know many people have asked in the past, well, why don't they then? Obviously they don't, otherwise crunch wouldn't be a thing. Well, they do, but remember the timelines, even the ones they come up with, would still have to be followed. Because you also have to remember that you have to account for corporate decision making that will always take those projected timelines and sort of squish them whenever possible. After all, time is money, and when you're paying 400 people $50,000+ per year, even shaving off a couple of weeks can save tremendous amounts of money. And so you have the corporate decision makers that understand they can get away with a tighter timeline with a bit of crunch, and so the project manager's recommended timetables are invariably used as toilet paper and discarded. And one of the other main problems with crunch and the apparent willingness of developers to engage in it is that if these developers don't accept these terrible business practices, then they essentially become blacklisted within the industry and they'll have to find another line of work entirely. But that doesn't mean they simply accept it, it's just that they don't really have much of a choice. And that is a terrible position to be in, as, what was it, something like over 25% of all overtime crunch hours went unpaid because this industry's fucking terrible? Plus, in the case of contractors, if they don't show that willingness to deal with really crummy work hours, then their chances of ever getting hired on as a full-time position decreases into the single-digit percentiles of likelihood. So yes, ultimately they do know it will happen, but that in no way shifts the blame to the rank and file developers, nor does it cause any of the blame to even be shouldered by them. In cases like crunch, yes, unionization could potentially be helpful in forcing more reasonable timelines for video games or larger numbers of staff to pick up on the workload. But ultimately, while some people say it's not a big deal because every industry has it to a lesser or greater extent, when it comes to video games, this particular industry does operate very differently from every other industry on the planet, sometimes for good, other times for ill. Gamers are highly sensitive to quality within our games. For some of us, it's visual quality. For others, it's sound or story or level design, and of course, combinations of any of those as well. Crunch presents a situation where the makers of our games are not able to operate at their full potential. Hell, they're not even able to operate at a fraction of their full potential during crunch. That can and will invariably translate directly to the quality of the game they're making, and we as gamers want the highest quality possible, even if that's any one of a million 8-bit retro 2D or 2.5D platformers. Plus, we want to protect the rank and file developers from the corporate greed machine. These are the people that actually make the games we all enjoy, and many of us want only the best for them and don't like to see them dealing with extreme hardships for our favorite pastime. So yeah, crunch should definitely be ended. I know I would love it if I only worked 8 or 10 hours a day. I might even be able to have a life outside of the day job and YouTube, but as with everything, there's always going to be a cost. Time is money, and eliminating crunch will be seen in one of a few different ways by the corporate greed machines. There's the potential for increased labor due to the extended development cycles. There's the potential for increased labor due to hiring more staff to make up the amount of hours projected. There's the increased overhead on advertisement cycles. That is how the corporate execs will see things, completely missing the fact that rested and alert employees are far more productive and can accomplish more in an 8-hour span than they normally could in 16 hours of crunch. And what will invariably happen for many of these companies that just don't give a damn about their employees is that they will exceed, but they will make sure someone, and by someone they would mean anyone not them, would pay the price. And they would do this by either decreasing staff or raising the price of their games. Crunch is not good, as I said, and yes, ending it should be a requirement, but we should also bear in mind that there will come a price to pay, and those we're trying to protect will most likely be the ones that are made to pay it. Does that mean we should alter course and accept a bad business practice simply out of fear of causing problems? Not at all, but we do need to be aware that potential cost is there so we can make sure any damage is mitigated as much as is reasonable. And as for contractors being complicit in their own crunch, again, that is the industry they live in, and it really boils down to either accept it or go work in another industry. So yes, ultimately there is a choice to be made there, so there is an argument that they are making this decision on themselves, but that really isn't much of a choice when you really look at the nitty-gritty of things. So I hope that answered the question sufficiently, and I hope I managed to equate myself well here. Please do like and comment, and if you feel I earned the extra effort, then show it by sharing this video on social media. Right now, YouTube is not suggesting my videos, and the only way for my channel to hit new eyeballs is if my viewers put it in front of other people by sharing it on Twitter or Facebook or Reddit. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I hope this was useful. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.